You can feel it, can't you? That weird tension hanging over this team right now. Not panic, not full confidence either, just uncertainty mixed with hope. The kind only Vikings fans truly understand. There's competition brewing inside that locker room, young players fighting for their careers, and one franchise legend about to receive the honor he's deserved for years. But honestly, the quarterback situation alone feels like it could either launch this team back into contention or crack the entire season wide open before September even gets here. There's always a couple guys every offseason who walk into rookie minicamp knowing the odds are stacked against them. No guarantees, no spotlight, no headlines. Just one helmet, one opportunity, and maybe one final shot to convince a coaching staff they belong in the NFL. And this weekend, 2 defensive players apparently did enough to force the Vikings to pay attention. Minnesota officially signed defensive lineman Smith Vilbert and linebacker Bengali Kamara after rookie tryouts. And honestly, these are the kinds of stories I love following every single year. Because for every first-round pick everybody talks about nonstop, there's another guy fighting just to stay in the building. Vilbert has good size too. 6'6", nearly 280 pounds, long frame, physical presence. Last season at North Carolina, he flashed some disruptive ability with tackles for loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. Meanwhile, Kamara brings that downhill linebacker mentality Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores love having around the defense. Nearly 10 tackles for loss at Kansas tells you this guy plays aggressive football. And look, nobody's pretending these signings suddenly transform the defense overnight. That's not what this is about. This is about depth, competition, development, culture. Those back-end roster battles matter more than people think once training camp starts heating up in August. And O'Connell even talked about it during minicamp, saying these weekends are designed to give opportunities to players who maybe didn't get drafted or signed immediately. That matters because Minnesota's coaching staff has quietly built a reputation around finding overlooked talent and developing it the right way. But what's interesting is how this connects emotionally to the bigger picture surrounding this roster right now. Everybody is fighting for something. Practice squad spots, rotational snaps, futures in the league. Nobody feels comfortable. And honestly, that kind of urgency can either sharpen a football team or expose cracks underneath the surface once the real pressure hits, especially when the most important position in football suddenly turns into a full-blown war. Because now we're starting to hear things that honestly feel a little more intense than Vikings fans expected when Kyler Murray first arrived. At first, most people assumed this was simple. Murray comes in, he starts. J.J. McCarthy develops quietly behind him. Easy storyline, clean transition. But now, that doesn't sound remotely close to what's happening inside TCO Performance Center. Tom Pelissero just made it crystal clear that the Vikings view this quarterback battle as completely open between Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy. Completely open. And the part that really grabbed my attention wasn't even the competition itself. It was Pelissero openly wondering how friendly that quarterback room is going to be once training camp gets rolling. That says a lot, because quarterbacks don't compete like linebackers compete. This stuff changes entire locker rooms. It changes leadership dynamics. It changes offensive chemistry. It changes how players emotionally connect to the direction of the franchise. Murray didn't come to Minnesota thinking he'd hold a clipboard. There's no chance. This is a former Pro Bowl quarterback trying to rebuild his reputation after Arizona moved on from him. And on the other side, you've got J.J. McCarthy, a former top 10 draft pick who knows the organization invested heavily in him as part of the future. Neither guy wants to lose this job. Neither guy believes he should lose this job. And honestly, that tension is probably already building whether people admit it publicly or not. McCarthy went 6-4 as a starter last season, but the inconsistency scared people. Too many mistakes. Too many moments where the offense stalled out. At the same time, Murray's career has been a roller coaster itself. Electric talent, but injuries and inconsistency followed him too. So now Kevin O'Connell has to manage one of the toughest balancing acts in football. He has to create a real competition without letting the locker room fracture into sides. Because once receivers start preferring one quarterback, once veterans quietly lean toward one voice, things can spiral fast. And the scary part? This battle probably won't stay quiet much longer once camp practices become public. And somehow the quarterback story keeps getting even stranger the deeper you look into the future. Because now there's already speculation about what happens if neither Kyler Murray nor J.J. McCarthy fully takes control of this team long term. Think about how wild that is for a second. We're sitting here in May talking about a quarterback battle for 2026, and people are already connecting Minnesota to Lamar Jackson in 2027. Fansided's Alicia D'Artola floated the Vikings as a potential landing spot if Jackson's future in Baltimore gets complicated financially, and honestly, you can immediately understand why people are fascinated by the idea. Imagine Lamar Jackson and Kevin O'Connell's offense throwing to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. That sounds almost unfair. It sounds like something Vikings fans would daydream about during long winters after another heartbreaking playoff loss. But underneath the excitement, there's also a pretty uncomfortable reality buried in this conversation. The Vikings still don't fully know who their long-term answer is at quarterback. That's the truth. Best case scenario? Either Murray revives his career completely, or McCarthy develops into the guy Minnesota believed he could become when they drafted him. Then all this outside speculation disappears overnight. But if neither player grabs the job and truly owns it, suddenly these Lamar Jackson conversations stop sounding ridiculous. They start sounding necessary. And financially, Minnesota actually positioned itself for flexibility after some recent roster decisions and cap management adjustments. Rob Brzezinski has always been creative finding ways to maneuver around difficult financial situations, but building around a superstar quarterback like Lamar would still completely reshape the organization's direction. And honestly, part of me hates even discussing this already because Vikings fans are exhausted from quarterback uncertainty. We've lived through enough of it. We know what instability at that position feels like. Yet another part of me understands why these conversations are happening. Because O'Connell is too good of an offensive coach to waste years floating in the middle without an answer under center. At some point, this franchise needs clarity, real clarity. And until somebody takes complete ownership of this offense, the outside noise around Minnesota's future quarterback plans probably isn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, quietly sitting behind all this quarterback chaos is a young receiver who might become one of the more interesting names on the roster this season. Because everybody's talking about Justin Jefferson. Everybody's talking about Jordan Addison, and now with Jauan Jennings arriving in Minnesota, most people assume the pecking order is already settled. But don't sleep on Ty Felton. Seriously, there's something about this situation that feels wide open underneath the surface. Felton barely made an impact last season after being drafted out of Maryland. 3 catches, minimal offensive production, mostly buried on the depth chart while trying to adjust to the NFL. Happens to a lot of young receivers, but now things are shifting a little. Jalen Naylor is gone. Rondale Moore's tragic passing still hangs emotionally over this organization. And suddenly Felton finds himself climbing into a much more meaningful role entering year 2. What makes this fascinating is the type of player he is. Speed changes everything in today's NFL. And this kid can absolutely fly. That 4.37 speed isn't fake track speed either. Minnesota believes he can stretch defenses vertically, especially when opposing secondaries are already obsessed with stopping Jefferson and Addison underneath. Kevin O'Connell talked this week about why the Vikings wanted Jauan Jennings specifically. Physicality, tough catches, winning isolated matchups, and Jennings absolutely brings that edge to the offense. Vikings fans are probably going to love his mentality once they see him play in purple and gold. But there's still opportunity here for Felton because his skill set is different. He gives this offense another explosive element that can create matchup problems if he develops chemistry with whichever quarterback wins the job. And honestly, this is one of those sneaky camp battles people aren't paying enough attention to yet. Because all it takes is one preseason game, one deep touchdown, one moment where a young player flashes confidence, and suddenly the entire conversation changes around him. Especially inside an offense built around spacing, timing, and explosive plays. And then there's the story that honestly hit me emotionally the hardest out of all of this. Because before all the quarterback debates, before all the offseason uncertainty, before all the heartbreak Vikings fans have carried for decades, there was one player who made Sundays feel electric every single time he touched the football. You knew the second he planted his foot in the turf, something unforgettable could happen. And now the organization is finally giving him one of the greatest honors possible. Adrian Peterson is officially heading into the Vikings Ring of Honor in 2026. Man, that just feels right. It feels overdue, honestly. Younger fans sometimes forget how terrifying Peterson was at his peak. Defenses knew exactly what was coming and still couldn't stop him. That 2012 season still feels unreal when you go back and think about it. Over 2,000 rushing yards after that devastating knee injury, carrying the franchise on his back, dragging the Vikings into the playoffs through sheer willpower and violence. That wasn't normal football. That was one of the greatest running back seasons the NFL has ever seen. 7 Pro Bowls, 7 All-Pros, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year. And every single Vikings fan remembers those moments where the stadium would collectively rise before he even hit the line of scrimmage because you could feel something dangerous building. Peterson gave this franchise identity during some difficult years. He gave Vikings fans pride when things around the team felt unstable. And honestly, hearing Minnesota call him an absolute legend in the announcement just brought back a flood of memories. The stiff arms, the breakaway runs, the violence, the emotion. Everything about him represented relentless football. Sure, the postseason success never fully came. That part still hurts. 1-4 in playoff appearances doesn't match the greatness of the player himself, but his legacy in Minnesota was cemented long before today. This Ring of Honor induction just makes it official forever. And maybe, just maybe, there's something poetic about this current Vikings team trying to fight its way back into contention during the same season Peterson gets immortalized inside franchise history. No matter how messy this offseason feels sometimes, this is why we stay emotionally attached to this team. The uncertainty, the memories, the hope that maybe this next chapter finally becomes the one Vikings fans have waited their entire lives to see. Whether it's a quarterback battle tearing through training camp, young players fighting for roster spots, or honoring legends who carried this franchise through unforgettable eras. It all matters to Purple Faithful because this team becomes part of your life after enough years. So tell me honestly, who should be QB1 when Week 1 arrives? And where does Adrian Peterson rank for you among the greatest Vikings of all time? I'll be down there reading every comment. Skol, Vikings Nation. Stay tuned. Skol Vikings. Let's go!